Welcome to SROA Soundboard, a podcast for radiation oncology administrators. Here's your host, Tammy McCausland.
Hello, I'm joined today by Dan Kenron, Quality and Accreditation Manager in the Department of Radiation Oncology at Oregon Health and Science University. We're here today to talk about New Starts Not Ready, which Dan and his colleague Kevin Keane presented at SROA's annual meeting. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Good morning, Tammy.
It's great to have you here today. I'd like to start by asking you, how did it become apparent that your new starts were not ready?
In the summer of 2023, we were having a problem that our plans weren't ready for our patients. That's how we came up with the term. Our new starts were just not ready for treatment. We saw that about 40% of our plans were not ready within 24 hours of the patient's scheduled treatment start time. That was problematic because we also were reading the Safety is No Accident publication from ASTRO and realized that we were compressing our work to fit into a very short time frame. When we had more time available, we just ended up rushing for our patients. And we noticed that parallel work was happening. And those things are problematic, not only from ASTRO's point of view of making sure that we have safe time for planning and for our patients to make sure the treatment's accurate. It also really was rushing and created an atmosphere of stress that wasn't useful.
How did not being ready impact the timelines of the patient care and the staff? You kind of talked about things working in parallel and that 24-hour window, but how did that really impact, say, on the ground?
Our therapists saw it as a problem, saying, wow, the sim was 2 weeks ago, and now we have all this work to do, this quality work to do in 5-10 minutes. Our physicists weren't getting the time to check the plans thoroughly. Our dosimetrists kind of caught in this middle of where's my work fitting in, and I need to scramble. But again, the patient was simmed a few weeks ago, and it just built this system of mistrust, maybe in the timeliness of getting your work done on time. And we also noticed that there was a quality issue with these plans. So a plan might reach the therapist for their quality check and then need to get sent back to physics for changes, some not serious and some maybe potentially serious. And we were concerned about the relationships and building that trust in our teams. It's frustrating not to have what you needed for your job. And our teams were experiencing that. All of our disciplines were saying like, hey, we should have enough time to do our work, and we don't. And sometimes when we get our work, it's not quite right, so we can't do our job. And that just created a lot of churn, frustration. And then for our patients, they could potentially be rescheduled, or their care could be disrupted. Our patients are complex. They have concurrent chemotherapy. They have housing needs, traveling from rural parts of our state. It creates more anxiety for the patient if we need to defer their care, even if it is possible to do that. It just creates a mistrust in our work, and we owe it to our patients to be ready, accurate, and effective, and our process wasn't delivering.
How did you use Royals to track and understand your not ready issues to, as I said, pinpoint the problems and devise the potential solutions?
Yeah, it was a learning process to learn how Royals could kind of be a little bit tweaked to support this. I started co-opting or I guess misusing maybe the internal use field, and I standardized a list of about 25 terms to categorize most of our Royals, what they can fall into. And terms like, well, the patient's not ready, if the Royals was about patient's new start not being ready, or there were some other common terms that I use are field name incorrect or clinical treatment planning note not updated. And we're able to put those into that discrete field. Royals is able to report out on that. So month after month, as we enter in these, essentially they become tags, we're able to report on these tags and start to report out our error rates or the frequency of occurrence of these common issues.
And how long did it take for you to use Royals to have those outputs?
Yeah, it's about a couple of months to gain enough data and to see where our process stabilizes around. We can start to understand what is is a current issue and where our new starts are generating common problems. I'd say maybe 3 or 4 months of collecting data is useful.
So are you still using Royals to see if you have new starts not ready, or have you pretty much resolved the problem?
Oh no, we're almost resolved the problem. We went from a rate of about 50% in June of 2023 of not being ready for our patients. So that's every other patient had a plan issue, and now we're about 8%. So 1 out of 12 patients have a plan issue or we're not ready to start. So we made incredible progress in these last 2 years, and we still have a ways to go. So yes, we're still using Royals to track not only our new starts, but our plan issues and understanding how our rates change over time.
Well, that's an amazing improvement. Do you think it's possible to get to 0%, or will there always be the potential for some kind of issue?
Well, I'll say from my perspective, right, as the manager of quality, I will always take the perspective of, yes, it's possible to get to 0 and it's possible to sustain that. I do know there are incredible challenges, and sometimes patient plans need to happen much faster. Sometimes they're way more complex. Sometimes things happen, but I think it's reasonable to get to 0. And I think that's what our patients deserve, and that's what they should expect from us.
You developed something called the New Start Calculator. Can you describe what that is and how it works and how it helps you?
Oh yeah, I have to give credit to our physicists. This is a brilliant piece of their work. And they're a really strong partner with the quality program and pretty ingenious at sometimes. So they developed a calculator that exists online. It's part of Microsoft SharePoint, but you can use any similar online spreadsheet-esque program to do what they do, which is essentially calculate the start date of when a patient should start based on their treatment needs. So this is a customizable calculator. We know what our standard treatment timeline should be. We know that when the patient had their simulation, and we can calculate out the time for each one of those steps. And that helps really address what we started our conversation about, which is that rushing and parallel processing. So it gave each step a deadline to be completed by. So we know based on when our simulation was, right, when our contour should be done, when the planning should be completed, when the plan should be signed, and then how long it takes for physics to do our QA and the therapists to do their QA checks. So this calculator just tells everyone where the treatment milestones are and when we can expect that patient to be scheduled to start treatment.
And what has been the response within your department, I guess, or maybe the Department of Radiation Oncology, to have the New Start Calculator?
It's been largely positive. I think it gives us 2 real benefits. One is what I mentioned, is gives everyone a deadline for their work. And then 2, in this model, we can track where the work is completed and not completed. So we have a visual dashboard of where patients' plans are at, and we're able to understand if we need to rally around a certain patient's planning, if we need to reach out to a physician to help them see where the barriers are to completing their next steps, and then how our therapists can work off of that list to make sure their QA checks are done.
When you kind of pinpointed the problems that you identified after using Royals, which changes did you decide to implement and how?
So back in 2023, when the new starts issue was coming to a head, this is where we started to say, well, we need a standard timeline for our work, and we need a standard way of calculating this work. So that was the first change we implemented. And then it's been just a series of improvements around how we were able to attack areas where we can perform better. We mapped out our process, and we came up with an impact effort grid of potential changes, and we ranked what we wanted to do. And so we started after the New Start Calculator, we started to get into how can we make point improvements. One of those point improvements was making sure that the teams worked ahead of their scheduled start time. I guess the unintended consequence of having deadlines in a New Start Calculator is that people only started when they were supposed to start. But we asked everyone to shift that mindset and say, well, if the step before you is done, please start, so we're not delaying. We noticed there was a lot of communication back and forth and delays in getting a plan approved, or so that negotiation process of developing the optimal plan for our patients. And so we moved that, we standardized communication pathways, and we moved to Microsoft Teams as our platform of choice to allow for synchronous communications of chats. Anyone can use any sort of Slack, Teams, messaging system, but we standardize how we do that so each patient has their own reply section, so we can get more information to all of our groups concurrently. We also saw that sometimes plans got lost. This was a little embarrassing to say, but we clarified who owns the plan at what step and how we're able to move that plan forward. And again, that goes back to what we talked a little bit about, having this visual dashboard of work that needs to be done.
What improvements have you noticed since you've implemented the changes?
I think the best feedback that I've gotten was from one of our radiation therapists who said, it feels a lot better. It's a lot less chaotic. And so goes back to that trust in our system and being able to work effectively across teams. We also notice we're on time more often, and I think that's noticeable in the work that we do. It's clear that we can achieve this timeline. And it's important that as we're growing, we make sure that we're hitting these milestones of plan development so that we don't delay other patients' care. I think it's been interesting to track the royals and see what problems emerge in our royals tracking, to then be able to pivot and address some of these concerns.
Have you also noticed a difference in terms of the patient care side?
One of the ones that we've been talking about recently is the AP versus PA view of hands in one case. And so how do we better build a plan that communicates what is needed before we get down to the treatment deadline? And so we're able to work backwards from those royals and build in either better quality checks on our physics side of things, or talk with our dosimetrists to see if the dosimetry and the physician dyad can write a better prescription to begin with.
So these changes and improvements require a lot of data tracking. Could you talk about how data tracking is both helpful but also a hindrance?
I'm a huge advocate for using data. I think as everyone has an opinion, and sometimes incredibly strong opinions, being able to point out to, are we making an improvement or not, with objective data is important. So it really helps know if we're tracking in the right direction or not. Also, I don't think I would have gotten people's attention about some of these issues if we weren't able to describe them as a rate of occurrence, or hey, either hey, in the last month we had this number of errors, or hey, in the last month the percentage of our rate of errors was this. So those are great conversations to talk out of. I think it's important to get people to rally around their change, and then it's also important to make sure that we know we're making an improvement with those changes. That's the helpful side of data. I think there's a huge hindrance side of data where it can become so complicated that it hinders itself. I don't think that people should spend more time collecting data than solving the problem. That's a little backwards. I've seen a lot of success in simplicity in collecting data. I sometimes tell people, like, hey, just use a crayon and a napkin if you need to, right? Just be able to track something without a lot of automated complexity that just builds on itself. Once we're able to describe a problem, we're better able to solve that problem. So I'd say the hindrance of data is, it can become a project in itself, and that slows everything down.
So what advice would you have for people trying to find that balance between data tracking and over collection?
Maybe if it takes you more than one sentence to describe what data you're collecting, it's maybe too complicated. That'd be my first sense. I can clearly describe to you, we use royals to track the rate of plan inconsistencies or plan problems. That's pretty simple. when it moves off of that and it takes more time and more energy to track those data or to explain what you're doing or explain why it's a problem, I start to reconsider if that data is useful or not.
Can you talk about efforts needed and challenges in being a high reliability organization?
Yeah, this is a journey that OHSU is going on in radiation oncology. We recognize that becoming a high reliability organization really is in line with the work that we do. High reliability is a term that comes out of the nuclear and aerospace industries, where they have very, very complicated processes that have really catastrophic results if they're not correct. And similar to that in radiation oncology, we have an incredibly complicated treatment process that a lot of people are responsible for. And the patient can have some pretty irreversible results if it's not correct. And so work has been translated from those industries to healthcare by AHRQ, the American Association of Healthcare Quality. And they really define the 5 concepts, right? We want to be preoccupied with our failure. We want to have reluctance to simplify what we do. We need to be sensitive to how we operate and where we're headed. We need to be resilient in our work, and then we need to defer to our expertise. And of those, it really speaks to how we communicate with each other, how we understand our problems, and how we look for the next upcoming problem. 2 things that we've really identified with are the preoccupation with failure and our commitment to resilience. So the first one, our preoccupation, means that we want to understand where the next problem will occur and start to mitigate it before it becomes a problem. One thing we're working on right now is continuing to refine our SIM order. We're seeing that we're getting some early indications that our SIM timing may not be correct, and there's a little bit of ambiguity in our order. So we want to be preoccupied with that and start to solve that SIM order inconsistencies or SIM order guessing or irregularities before it impacts our patient care. And then committing to resilience means that we need to start learning from our failures. So as we go through these iterative cycles of improvement, we're able to see where we have failed and how do we become resilient and make sure we don't do that again. So it creates a learning system. So part of that is feeding back what we learn in our royals about our new plans to our physics quality checklist. So they should be aware of what issues we're seeing. And the resilience comes in of modifying their QA or their quality check to make sure that we catch those errors. Then the next step from that is becoming even more resilient and saying, oh, wow, physics is really seeing this error. We're able to catch it before it hits our therapist. But then the next step is to take that to our dosimetry group and say, wow, we keep having this event pop up or this inconsistency in our plans. Let's start from the beginning, really mitigate the error way back in there. And if we need to, go back to the prescription and how that's written so that we really have a smooth process that's less error prone than it was before.
If other radiation oncology clinics would like to copy or adapt what you've done, what would they do or what should they do?
I would encourage other organizations to start using royals and adding discrete terms that they're able to track over time through reporting out of royals. So there are a few free text fields. Like I said, we use the internal use ones. And then by defining a set of terms, they're able to track those over time. That's a great way of starting to learn about your system. I'd also encourage people to learn as they see their royals, continue to ask, how could we prevent this from happening again, to build in some of that resilience to their systems. As we started talking about data too, we just make sure that people agree what the problem is. And that's through smart measurement and being able to say, hey, we're going to measure the rate of occurrence of this issue. We all agree that if we all agree what we're talking about is this problem and here's how often it occurs. And then we can start to make changes and experiments to reduce that.
Often people identify a problem, but you get some resistance because people don't sometimes want to go through the hard work that's necessary to make the change. If people encounter that, what would you suggest they do?
Oh, Tammy, it's a fantastic question. And I think the answer is one that is common among it really depends, right? It depends on what the problem is and how the resistance is perceived. I'd say more often than not, listening is probably the best way to start to address that concern. So really listen and say, wow, we're hearing that you have a problem with the change. And again, it goes back to our data. So maybe listening with data, right? We have a rate of this. We don't want this. This affects our patients negatively. So like I said, having a rate of 50% of our plans not being ready on time. Well, that really affects our patients and affects our team. We know that that's a problem. And if you don't want to get on board with the changes, we can understand what your concerns are, because there might be some valid concerns about, or our colleagues may be telling us something. And there's also the need to change and improve. And so that's the sort of a little bit of it depends comes in, but I think a lot can be gained by listening to where people's concerns are and helping address their concerns with the eye on our patients being the primary goal for us to improve.
What's the next big problem you're working on?
We're getting into a point where our patient volume is growing, creating a growing capacity concern. And so we are really focusing on how do we meet our growing demand within our current footprint. And as with everyone, right, there's a constant pace of replacing our linear accelerators, learning how to share space with other programs, including our growing brachytherapy program. So one of the consideration is how we're redoing our work, and are we effective at what we're doing, right? So this brings in a little bit of the lean process improvement, right? Are we doing redundant work? Are we over processing? Are we creating work that has no value? And we don't have the time to do that anymore. So we need to really focus on how do we be accurate and effective, but also timely in the work that we do. And that leads us to the second system, which is like, how do we make sure that, I guess I should start over and say, those are our two problems, right? It's a capacity, and then making sure the work that we do is really effective. So we don't have the time to do it twice. So we can say we have a real capacity issue, and we don't want to keep putting in work that has no value.
Makes sense. Thank you for all the insights you shared today, Dana. It's great to talk to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. To learn more about SROA, visit www.sroa.org.